Beyond the collapse, how the empath truly heals. The wound is the place where the light enters you. Rumi. Every empath knows this truth intimately. Pain isn't your punishment, it's your initiation. In this journey, Beyond the Collapse, how the empath truly heals, we'll explore how the deepest emotional breakdowns become gateways to awakening, and how your sensitivity, once seen as a weakness, can transform into your greatest strength. Carl Jung reminded us that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So ask yourself, are you ready to face the part of you that still hurts, not to fix it, but to understand it? If this message resonates with your soul, share your thoughts in the comments below and tell us, what has your pain taught you about yourself? 1. The collapse of the empath. Empaths reach a moment when their inner light flickers and fades, not from fragility, but from carrying too much of the world's emotional weight. It is a silent surrender, a point where the psyche can no longer bear the burden of constant giving and begins to shut down as a form of divine protection. This state, which Carl Jung called nigredo, the blackening, is the first stage of transformation where the old identity dissolves. In spirituality, this moment of collapse is sacred, for it marks the beginning of true spiritual awakening. The empath, once filled with light for others, must now journey into their own darkness to rediscover the source of that light within. This psychological and spiritual shutdown is not a failure, but a calling inward. It is the soul's way of saying enough the boundaries have been crossed. The heart has given more than it received. In this stage, emotions flatten, the familiar sensitivity turns numb, and the empath feels detached from their surroundings. But beneath this stillness, a profound alchemy is taking place. The collapse burns away illusions of endless compassion and false responsibility. The empath begins to see that saving everyone else is not love, it is self-erasure. Only through this darkness can they begin to rebuild their energy and remember that healing is not about absorbing pain, but about transmuting it into wisdom. Through this descent, the empath faces their own shadow. They realize that what they called empathy was often a mask for guilt or fear of rejection. They understand that spirituality is not about staying in constant light, but about embracing both darkness and illumination as one continuum of growth. The Negrito asks them to sit with discomfort, to stop identifying with the role of the healer, and to allow the unconscious to surface. This process may feel like emotional death, yet in truth, it is liberation, the end of a cycle of overextension and the rebirth of self-respect. As the empath moves through this blackened stage, they begin to perceive balance as the true essence of awakening. No longer reactive to every vibration, they become discerning. They feel deeply but selectively, love without losing themselves, and understand that compassion must begin at home. In this awakening, boundaries become sacred prayers, and silence becomes medicine. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The empath lives this truth firsthand, learning that enlightenment is not found by escaping pain, but by integrating it. Eventually, the empath emerges transformed, grounded, aware, and whole. They no longer chase healing, they embody it. Their energy, once scattered across countless souls, now flows through a centered heart. The collapse was never the end. It was the alchemical fire that purified the empath's spirit. This is the paradox of spirituality, that only through breaking can one become whole, and only through darkness can one remember the true meaning of light. 2. Death of the false self. When an empath reaches the point of collapse, it is not a breakdown, but a sacred dismantling of the death of the false self. Everything you once believed you had to be begins to dissolve. The helper, the strong one, the healer. These roles once gave you identity, but now they feel heavy, restrictive, and empty. Carl Jung called them the persona masks that society celebrates, but the soul cannot breathe beneath. Spirituality burns through these illusions like holy fire, consuming every false image you've built to survive. The psyche destroys what no longer aligns with truth, so that the authentic self, the union of both light and shadow, can finally rise. It is not destruction, it is purification, the death of what is temporary, so that what is eternal may live. You begin to feel the quiet unraveling of all that was never truly yours. The relationships that demanded your self-sacrifice start to fade. The ambitions driven by external validation lose their appeal, and even your old ways of showing strength begin to crumble. What once made you feel secure now feels like a cage. This is the initiation of spiritual development, the soul's rebellion against conformity. You are being stripped, not because you are losing, but because your higher self is reclaiming space. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what this collapse does. It exposes the unconscious patterns you lived by and asks you to choose truth over performance. This transformation demands radical honesty. You are being called to stand unmasked, to face yourself without titles or approval, to meet your own gaze without the armor of being useful. The ego trembles because it thrives on control, but the soul thrives on surrender. In the silence that follows the collapse, you may feel like everything is gone, yet this emptiness is not a void. It is the pure space where your true self begins to take root. What you are losing is illusion. What you are gaining is freedom. The false self dies not because you failed to hold it together, but because your soul is finally strong enough to live without it. And as you walk through this death, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop identifying with the roles and start embodying your essence. The empath's strength no longer comes from fixing others, but from being whole within. You stop seeking love through service and start radiating love through presence. You stop performing peace and begin being peace. This is the highest state of spiritual development, when healing is no longer about mending your pain, but about becoming who you were before the world taught you to hide. Every collapse is a sacred invitation to remember who you are beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the masks. So when everything in your life seems to be falling apart, realize that it is falling into alignment. The fire is not your enemy, it is your liberation. Let it burn away the false and reveal the infinite. The empath's collapse is not the end. It is the moment your spirit finally breathes as itself. Are you ready to shed what no longer serves your soul and step into your true self? If this message resonates with your journey of transformation, comment below. I release the false self, to declare your readiness to heal and awaken. 3. Descent and the void. When you enter the void, it feels like being stripped of everything you thought defined you. The empath's world collapses, and what remains is silence so deep it shakes the soul. You begin to question your purpose, your identity, and even your sanity. But Carl Jung reminds us that this descent isn't a curse. It's a sacred process. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, he said, but by making the darkness conscious. The void is not punishment, it's purification. It's the soul's way of dismantling illusions so that something truer, wiser, and freer can emerge from within. Society may pressure you to bounce back quickly, to rebuild what was lost. But Jung warns against rebuilding too soon, because rebirth without full dissolution only recreates the same old prison in a new form. As you move through this sacred emptiness, you are not losing yourself. You are losing everything that isn't truly you. The pain you feel is the friction of transformation. The loneliness you sense is the space your spirit needs to expand. This dark night of the soul is the in-between stage where death and rebirth overlap, where the old self dissolves and the authentic self begins to breathe. You may mistake it for depression, but it's deeper than that. It's a spiritual renovation, a stripping away of false attachments and emotional residue that clouded your essence. Spiritual wisdom teaches that silence is not absence. It's divine presence in its purest form. You are being emptied so that higher consciousness can fill you again. For the empath, this process is especially profound. You've spent so much of your life feeling others' pain, absorbing their emotions, carrying their burdens. The void forces you to feel your own truth without distraction. It calls you to reclaim your emotional sovereignty, to stop saving everyone else, and finally rescue yourself. What once seemed like collapse is actually alignment. What felt like loss becomes liberation. The old energy structures that bound you to external validation disintegrate, and your inner compass begins to realign with divine order. Jung believed that healing isn't about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. The void, then, is not the end of your story. It's the space where you remember who you've always been, beneath the noise of the world. This is the stage where your sensitivity becomes your strength. Your empathy, once heavy with others' pain, now transforms into clear perception and intuition. You begin to see life not as chaos, but as sacred choreography, every collapse leading you closer to truth. And in that stillness, you realize that the void never meant to destroy you. It came to deliver you back to yourself. As Jung wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." The dark night doesn't mean the absence of light. It means the light is being refined. If you surrender to it fully, you'll discover that the void isn't empty at all. It's overflowing with the wisdom of your becoming. 4. The turning point, surrender. Transformation begins when the empath no longer fights their own sensitivity, but surrenders to it, allowing the walls of resistance to crumble. In that sacred moment of surrender, acceptance quietly replaces the harsh voice of self-judgment, and peace begins to emerge where chaos once ruled. The ego, which has long battled the unconscious in fear of losing control, finally lays down its weapons and learns to cooperate with the deeper, wiser layers of the psyche. Carl Jung taught that what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. And this truth becomes the empath's awakening. The more one fights their emotional nature, the more trapped they become in the very pain they wish to escape. Yet when you stop resisting, you begin to hear a new voice rising from within the voice of the self, gentle yet powerful, whispering, "You don't need to save anyone to have value." This voice carries the essence of spiritual wisdom. It is the birth of wise compassion, the point where love matures beyond dependency and empathy evolves into clarity. You begin to care deeply, yet you no longer merge with another's suffering. You love others without losing yourself. This marks the true beginning of spiritual awakening, when love ceases to be a form of rescue and becomes an act of freedom. The empath learns that healing others was never the purpose. Healing the self is what creates the frequency that naturally heals the world. In this state, compassion flows effortlessly because it is no longer tied to guilt, obligation, or fear. You realize that the desire to fix others was often a mirror of your own hidden wounds, an unconscious attempt to save the parts of yourself that once felt unworthy or unseen. Surrender transforms this dynamic completely. Instead of carrying everyone's pain as your own, you learn to observe it with stillness. You discover that by staying centered in your energy, you bring more light to a situation than by trying to control it. The empath's power lies not in emotional labor, but in spiritual presence. This is where the ego and soul begin to work together. The ego provides structure, while the soul provides direction. In this inner cooperation, you step into balance. You no longer react from fear. You respond from wisdom. You no longer absorb emotions unconsciously. You transmute them consciously. As your consciousness deepens, you stop seeing your sensitivity as weakness. You start to see it as sacred technology, an antenna connecting you to divine intelligence. You recognize that your role is not to drown in others' emotions, but to remain calm within the storm, to reflect peace rather than chaos. This is the empath's evolution, from rescuer to healer, from martyr to master of energy. The moment you surrender is the moment you begin to create from alignment instead of pain. Your energy stabilizes, your boundaries strengthen, and your love becomes more powerful because it is pure. The voice of the self grows louder each day, guiding you toward authenticity and reminding you that your worth has never been measured by your to suffer for others, but by your ability to embody truth. Through surrender, the empath awakens to their highest purpose, to radiate light by being light. This is not about doing more, but about being fully present, allowing the divine flow of life to move through you effortlessly. When you finally let go of control and open to trust, you experience what Jung called the union of opposites, where the conscious and unconscious dance together in harmony. You no longer seek to escape darkness. You integrate it. You no longer chase love. You become it. And in that sacred wholeness, the empath truly heals. Leave your like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next step of your awakening journey. Comment below, "I surrender to divine guidance," to affirm your readiness for this turning point of healing and transformation. 5. Early integration and rebirth. As integration begins to unfold, something sacred awakens within you. Boundaries that once felt heavy with guilt now arise naturally, no longer as walls, but as gates of discernment protecting your peace. You no longer need to explain why you choose silence over noise or stillness over chaos. Your energy itself speaks a quiet language of self-respect. Solitude, once feared as emptiness, now feels like nourishment, a sacred retreat where you return to your essence. The stillness that once echoed with loneliness now hums with divine companionship. It is here, in this gentle isolation, that spirituality stops being a theory and becomes an experience of presence, an unfolding of spiritual development from within. Your empathy evolves from absorption to witnessing. You no longer drown in the emotions of others, but stand as a clear mirror, reflecting without distortion, loving without losing yourself. You see pain, but you also see potential. You listen deeply, but you no longer confuse compassion with carrying someone else's burden. Dreams that once swirled in confusion begin to reveal order. Symbols that once frightened you now illuminate your inner wisdom. What once felt like chaos now carries divine meaning messages from the unconscious, aligning you with your path. Your inner world, once stormy and unpredictable, begins to move in harmony with something greater, as if your soul finally exhales after years of holding its breath. This stage is what alchemists called the albedo and rubedo, the whitening and reddening, the cleansing and the illumination, the emergence of new light and refined gold. Your energy, once erratic and fleeting like fireworks, becomes steady like the sun, constant, radiant, dependable. You no longer rise and fall with every external tide. Instead, you embody the quiet rhythm of the cosmos. Your nervous system relaxes. Your breath deepens. You no longer seek to control life. You participate in its divine dance. This is the rebirth of your power, the restoration of your inner equilibrium. The moment you realize that collapse was never a failure, but a sacred initiation. Carl Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." You now understand this truth, not intellectually, but through experience. Every collapse carved space for your expansion. Every heartbreak became a teacher of boundaries. Every silence taught you how to listen to your soul. You are no longer surviving your empathy. You are mastering it. What once felt like a curse now feels like grace. You sense that your sensitivity is not weakness, but spiritual precision, the ability to feel life deeply without being destroyed by it. As you continue walking this path of integration, you discover that healing is not linear, but cyclical. An ebb and flow of light and shadow, contraction and expansion. You learn to honor both the stillness and the movement, the solitude and the connection. You stop identifying with pain and start identifying with awareness. You no longer chase peace. You cultivate it in your breath, your choices, your presence. Spirituality is no longer about escaping suffering, but transforming it into wisdom. And so, through this process, the empath is reborn, no longer collapsing under the weight of others, but standing firm in divine neutrality. The lesson here is timeless. Healing is not about becoming invincible, but about becoming whole. When you integrate your heart with your boundaries, your empathy with your discernment, your emotion with your awareness, you enter the golden stage of the soul. This is the rubedo, the sacred gold forged through fire, where you shine not to be seen, but because you have become one with the light itself. 6. The work of shadow integration. Empaths carry the beautiful yet heavy burden of feeling deeply, but true healing begins when they dare to face what lies hidden within the shadow self. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, once said, "I'd rather be whole than good." For an empath, this means learning that goodness without wholeness is a fragile illusion. When you constantly suppress your anger, deny your exhaustion, or silence your desire to be cared for, those emotions don't vanish. They sink into the unconscious, shaping your reality in quiet, painful ways. You begin to confuse self-sacrifice with love, overgiving with compassion, and peacekeeping with purpose. Yet the path of real spiritual wisdom invites you to reclaim those lost fragments, to see that your shadow is not your enemy, but your guide toward integration. To be whole is to allow every part of yourself to breathe the gentle and the fierce, the giver and the receiver, the calm and the storm. The empath who learns this truth no longer lives from depletion, but from alignment. You start to recognize that anger is not a flaw, but a signal that your boundaries have been crossed. Fatigue becomes a sacred reminder that even light needs rest. The need to be nurtured is not selfish, it is human. Spiritual awakening is not about escaping your darkness, but about embracing it so fully that it transforms into wisdom. Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the essence of shadow integration, transforming unconscious pain into conscious power, turning emotional chaos into grounded compassion. When you integrate the parts you once rejected, you stop projecting them onto others. You no longer attract relationships that drain you or experiences that repeat your wounds. Instead, you cultivate authentic empathy, compassion with boundaries, love with strength, and service without self-erasure. In this wholeness, you discover that being spiritual is not about constant positivity or detachment from human emotion. It's about radical honesty with your own soul. You see that light without darkness is incomplete, and that the divine exists even in your flaws. The empath who learns to hold both tenderness and truth becomes unshakable, no longer collapsing under emotional storms, but moving through them with grace and awareness. This is the real healing Carl Jung pointed to, not in perfection, but in integration. When you reclaim your shadow, you stop needing to be good for others and start being real for yourself. You find that spiritual wisdom is not in denying your humanness, but in sanctifying it. Every tear, every limit, every outburst becomes part of your sacred evolution. You are not broken. You are becoming whole. 7. Sovereignty, energy mastery, and boundaries. Healing is not about fixing what is broken, but remembering the wholeness that was never lost. In spirituality and spiritual awakening, the empath's true journey begins when compassion becomes sovereign, when love no longer costs you your peace. You start to realize that empathy without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. Sovereign compassion means you love openly, yet protect your own energy fiercely. Your boundaries no longer feel like rigid walls of defense, but living membranes, flexible, conscious, and alive. They allow what uplifts your spirit to enter, while keeping out what drains your life force. You begin to sense that helping others is not about rescuing them, but about respecting their timing, their choices, and their unique lessons in growth. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And so, you awaken to the truth that unconscious giving from guilt, fear, or emptiness only perpetuates exhaustion. True healing begins when giving becomes intentional, when it flows from overflow rather than depletion. As you deepen into energy mastery, you become a guardian of your own field. You sense energy as if it were music, feeling when the rhythm is smooth and when it is discordant. You learn when to extend your light and when to draw it inward for rest and renewal. You understand that real service never drains. It replenishes both giver and receiver because it comes from alignment, not compulsion. Energy mastery is not about control or detachment. It is about harmony. You stop absorbing everyone's pain and start transmuting it through awareness. You recognize that your sensitivity is not a curse, but a superpower when guided by wisdom. You begin to live from your center instead of reacting to the noise around you. Compassion becomes your strength, not your weakness. Because it no longer bleeds, it radiates. Each boundary you set becomes a declaration of self-respect and divine integrity. Each moment you choose stillness over overextension, you reclaim a piece of your power. You no longer chase validation through saving others. Instead, you offer your presence as a sacred gift. This is what sovereign compassion feels like: open yet anchored, kind yet discerning, giving yet grounded. It is the ability to love without losing yourself, to feel deeply without drowning, to care profoundly without collapsing. When you embody this state, you no longer identify as a wounded empath, but as an awakened soul who understands that protecting your peace is an act of love, not separation. Your compassion matures from emotion to embodiment, from reaction to sacred choice. In this state, helping others becomes effortless because it flows from a full cup, not an empty vessel. You no longer give to prove your worth. You give because you have become love itself, steady, luminous, and whole. Comment below: I honor my energy and protect my peace. If you're ready to step into your full sovereignty and master your spiritual boundaries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss more deep insights from spiritual wisdom. 8. Transformation of relationships. As you evolve, relationships that once revolved around emotional dependency or imbalance begin to dissolve like leaves falling from a tree no longer in season. This is not loss, it is purification. The empath who once poured their entire being into others now learns that love is not about sacrifice, it is about presence. When you grow in spirituality and spiritual development, your frequency changes, and the people who once resonated with your pain may no longer align with your peace. You stop trying to be everything for everyone, stop rescuing those who refuse to rise, and start honoring your own energy as sacred. This shift may feel unsettling at first, as familiar bonds fade, but what's really happening is that your soul is cleansing space for deeper, truer connections. You begin to meet those who value truth over illusion, reciprocity over convenience, and compassion over control. These are the souls who recognize your light without demanding that you dim it. They honor your sensitivity instead of exploiting it, respect your boundaries instead of testing them, and mirror your authenticity with their own. Love starts to feel different, no longer heavy or draining, but expansive and liberating. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you step into that truth, love transforms from dependency into divine partnership. You no longer cling out of fear of loss, because you understand that real love cannot be lost. It can only evolve. During this transition, solitude becomes a sacred teacher. You may feel moments of emptiness, but that emptiness is not absence. It is space. Space for peace, clarity, and new beginnings. Boundaries, once feared as walls, now reveal themselves as gates of discernment, allowing only what nourishes your soul to enter. You stop chasing validation and start radiating worth. Every time you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what empowers you. Every connection that falls away becomes proof of your growth, a reminder that healing sometimes requires release. Gradually, you realize that love without balance is not love, it is attachment. And attachment, for the empath, is the silent thief of peace. True love doesn't demand you abandon yourself. It invites you to expand within yourself. You learn to love from fullness rather than lack, from strength rather than sacrifice. The people who remain in your life after this transformation are those who see you, not as a savior, but as an equal souls walking side by side, not one carrying the other. The essence of this spiritual development is learning that boundaries do not kill love, they purify it. They strip away pretense and reveal the truth. You stop seeking people who complete you and start cherishing those who complement you. Every healthy relationship you build thereafter becomes a reflection of your own wholeness, a mirror showing that your heart no longer bleeds to be seen, but shines to be shared. And in that sacred realization, the empath who once loved to heal others finally heals by loving themselves. 9. The healed empath, conscious compassion. A healed empath is not someone who denies their sensitivity, but one who transforms it into conscious compassion. You no longer serve from a place of exhaustion or the need to fix others. Instead, you serve from wholeness. You have learned, through spiritual wisdom, that real compassion is not born from self-sacrifice, but from awareness. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And for the empath, this is the key to healing, to stop letting unconscious guilt and pain dictate your giving. When you awaken, your love becomes clean, no longer tied to saving others, but to honoring the divine within yourself. You understand that your sensitivity is not a burden, but a gift. And when used consciously, it becomes your greatest strength. Your very presence begins to heal others because it radiates calm, peace, and authenticity. You no longer need to speak about transformation. You embody it. People feel your steadiness as medicine in motion. As you evolve, you begin to realize that energy exchange is sacred. You no longer give away your peace to comfort others' chaos. Instead, you guide them by remaining centered in your truth. Through the teachings of Carl Jung and the essence of spiritual wisdom, you learn that compassion must include the self. When you hold yourself with kindness, you stop attracting relationships that depend on your suffering. You no longer confuse empathy with martyrdom. You no longer feel responsible for everyone's emotions. You've learned that protecting your light is not selfish, it is spiritual maturity. Jung believed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And for the empath, this means shedding the false identities of savior, healer, or victim and stepping fully into authenticity. You stop chasing people who drain you because you have remembered your worth. Now, your energy sustains rather than burns out. You operate from alignment, not anxiety. Your boundaries are firm yet compassionate, and your empathy flows freely without cost. Every act of service comes from overflow, not depletion. Every word you speak carries depth because it emerges from silence, not noise. You no longer perform goodness. You are goodness in its purest form, humble, radiant, alive. The healed empath lives with open eyes and a soft heart, but no longer bleeds for those unwilling to heal themselves. Your compassion becomes an act of truth, not pity. You help when guided, not when guilted. This is how an empath truly heals, by turning inward, embracing their shadow, and integrating their sensitivity with strength. The light that once flickered from overgiving now shines steadily from awareness. You embody the essence of conscious compassion, no longer drained by the world, but elevated by it. You have become a living example of what Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole. Through spiritual wisdom, you no longer seek to escape your empathy, but to master it, allowing it to guide you, sustain you, and flow through you as a divine expression of who you were always meant to be. To affirm your growth as a healed empath, walking in conscious compassion, declare your alignment with this truth. Comment below, "I lead with compassion," to honor your healing journey and inspire others to awaken the same light within. 10. Beyond the collapse, true healing. The collapse you once feared was never destruction. It was divine alchemy in motion. Everything that fell apart was not meant to break you, but to burn away what was false, so the truth of who you are could finally emerge. The empath realizes that the fall was not the end, but the beginning of an awakening, a sacred dismantling of the illusions that once defined their identity. What shattered was not your soul, but the mask you wore to survive. In that moment of ruin, you met your own depth, and for the first time, you saw that pain was never your enemy, but your greatest teacher. As Carl Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." The empath begins to understand that spirituality is not about chasing light, but learning to hold the darkness without fear. The old self dies so the authentic one may live, the one that no longer seeks external approval, no longer bends to the noise of the world, but stands grounded in its own truth. Healing becomes the art of remembering. You are not fixing what is broken. You are rediscovering what was always whole beneath the chaos. This is the birth of the individuated being Jung spoke of, whole, sovereign, and free. You begin to see that your sensitivity was never a weakness, but a form of higher intelligence, a bridge between the human and the divine. The collapse, once seen as tragedy, now reveals itself as grace, the fire that purifies, the silence that teaches, the darkness that births the light. The empath rises from their ashes, not as the same person, but as someone who now understands that the soul's evolution requires both beauty and despair. You no longer run from shadow. You embrace it as part of your spiritual awakening. This is where the wisdom of Nietzsche's amor fati becomes alive within you, the ability to love everything that happens, light and dark alike, for both are sacred. You start to love your past, your pain, your losses, because each was a necessary ingredient in your becoming. To love your fate is to stop wishing life were different and to begin seeing every event as perfectly designed for your soul's unfolding. The empath no longer lives in resistance, but in reverence. Every heartbreak becomes a scripture, every silence a form of prayer, every scar a map home to the self. You learn that spirituality is not found in escaping reality, but in embracing it fully, feeling everything without being consumed, loving deeply without losing yourself, and walking through darkness without forgetting the light that lives within you. Through this journey, you become the embodiment of balance, the living union of opposites. You hold space for chaos and peace, pain and purpose, without collapsing into either. The collapse was never your destruction. It was your transformation, the sacred initiation that brought you back to your essence. What once felt like death becomes the proof of rebirth. The empath, once fragile, now walks as a healer, not because they escaped suffering, but because they learned to transform it into spiritual wisdom. And in that realization, you finally understand that healing is not about erasing what happened. It is about becoming the person who can love it all. True healing, as Carl Jung taught, begins when the empath stops trying to save the world and learns to save themselves, when compassion no longer means self-sacrifice, but conscious love guided by inner wisdom. Remember, every collapse is not the end, but the sacred breaking that reveals your true light beneath the pain. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos on healing, awakening, and spiritual growth. 7 brutal Jungian truths that rebuild your mind into something no one can break. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Every moment of your life is shaped by the unseen patterns of your own mind. The truth is, most people never rebuild their mental foundations. They decorate their cages instead of breaking them. But the 7 brutal Jungian truths you're about to discover will challenge your comfort zone and teach you how to rebuild your mind into something no one can break. So, as you watch this video, I invite you to ask yourself, which of these truths am I ready to face today? Share your reflections in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to awaken. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where spiritual awakening meets the power of the mind. 1. Control the narrative. Power lies in perception. Reality is not ruled by truth, but by perception. In a world driven by appearances, people rarely respond to your intentions. They respond to how your energy makes them feel. That is why those who master the art of perception are never truly defeated. To be mentally unbreakable, you must learn to control your narrative, shape your image, and direct how others experience your presence. This isn't manipulation, it's self-mastery, the essence of spirituality turned into psychological strength. Spiritual awakening is not just about peace or kindness. It is about becoming conscious of the vibration you project and using that awareness to move through life with quiet power. You start by mastering your tone, your energy, and even your silence. Your silence can speak louder than your words, your composure louder than your explanations. The spiritually awakened know that over-explaining weakens the power of their truth. Every time you rush to justify yourself, you silently tell the world you doubt your own worth. So instead, you speak less and allow your energy to do the work. Your posture, your calmness, your gaze, these communicate confidence long before words can. People feel your inner authority before they understand it. In moments of misunderstanding, you don't chase approval or try to convince anyone of your goodness. You understand that perception shifts not through desperate words, but through consistent presence. You keep showing up with integrity, and over time, that steadiness reshapes how others see you. When your actions and your aura align, truth becomes undeniable. This is spiritual maturity, the realization that your energy is your first language, and the way you carry yourself tells the world how to treat you. As your consciousness deepens, you begin to see that reputation is not vanity, It's energetic protection. It is your invisible armor. When people sense strength, they tread carefully. When they sense uncertainty, they push boundaries. So you build a reputation not to impress, but to guard your peace. You refine your character until your calmness commands respect. You stop labeling yourself as unlucky or broken, because your subconscious and the universe listen to every word you say about yourself. Instead, you speak power, you breathe confidence, and you radiate certainty. Through this practice, you realize that perception is not a mask. It's a mirror reflecting your inner alignment. The more spiritually centered you are, the more effortlessly your outer world adapts to that truth. You begin to embody someone who no longer reacts, but responds with purpose. You pause before you speak, breathe before you answer, and let silence reveal the intentions of others. Every choice, every gesture, every word becomes deliberate. And in that calm awareness, you step into sovereignty. If you do not define yourself, the world will define you, and it will not be kind. The power lies in perception, and perception begins within. To rebuild your mind into something no one can break, you must own your story, guard your energy, and walk through life as if your presence itself is a statement of truth. That is where psychology meets spirituality, where the conscious mind becomes a temple, and your reputation becomes the light that no shadow can dim. Have you ever tried to control your own narrative instead of letting others define your story? If so, share how it changed your mindset in the comments below, so we can all learn from your journey. If not, comment, "I will reclaim my power," to begin mastering your perception and rebuilding an unbreakable mind together. 2. Detach from emotion. Feel without falling. Emotions are powerful forces, but when you let them control you, they become invisible chains that keep you enslaved to the world. In spirituality and spiritual development, detachment from emotion is not about being numb. It's about being free. It means you no longer allow anger, fear, or sadness to dictate your actions or define your identity. When someone provokes you and you instantly react, they hold power over you. But when you can feel the emotion, pause, and respond with awareness, that is mastery. As Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you gain control over your emotions, you begin to rule your inner kingdom instead of being ruled by it. You stop living as a prisoner of temporary feelings and start living as the creator of your state of mind. To detach from emotion is not to suppress what you feel, but to rise above the chaos and observe it from a higher level of consciousness. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, but remaining untouched by its wind. That's the power of inner stability. You still feel anger, but you don't let it turn into destruction. You still feel fear, but you don't allow it to paralyze you. You still feel pain, but you don't let it define you. Emotional detachment gives you the ability to see clearly when everything around you is uncertain. It allows you to respond with wisdom rather than react with impulse. And in doing so, you begin to experience true freedom, the kind that no one can take away. This level of emotional control is a key part of spiritual development. It's the practice of transforming emotions into awareness and reaction into response. You start recognizing that every emotion carries a message. Anger teaches you where your boundaries are. Fear reveals where your faith is weak. Sadness opens your heart to empathy. When you understand this, emotions stop being your enemies and become your greatest teachers. You no longer run from them or fight them. You listen, learn, and let them pass through you without losing your center. That is when you truly step into emotional intelligence, when you can feel deeply without being consumed. Detachment also means you stop giving others the power to determine your peace. You no longer depend on external validation to feel complete. You stop chasing approval, affection, or recognition because your worth no longer comes from what others give, but from what you already are. In spirituality, this is called inner sovereignty, the moment you become untouchable, not because you don't care, but because you've learned how to care consciously. Life will still bring storms of rejection, betrayal, and disappointment, but you will move through them like a calm river, flowing, steady, and unbreakable. To feel without falling is the highest form of strength. It's when you cry, but do not collapse, when you love, but do not lose yourself, when you experience chaos, yet remain centered in peace. That's the essence of spiritual development, the art of mastering your inner world so that no external force can break it. When you learn to control your emotions instead of being controlled by them, you transcend the ordinary and step into true power. This is where your evolution begins, where emotion becomes energy, awareness becomes wisdom, and your mind becomes unshakable. 3. Expect betrayal. Trust strategy, not sympathy. Expect betrayal, but trust strategy, not sympathy. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." And that is where true spiritual wisdom begins. Loyalty is never permanent. It shifts like the tides of human emotion, bound to change when fear, desire, or self-interest take control. People will promise loyalty when it serves them, but when the winds of circumstance shift, so do their hearts. Betrayal, then, is not a sign of evil. It is a reflection of human nature itself. When you stop seeing betrayal as cruelty and start seeing it as inevitability, you become unshakable. You no longer crumble under disappointment because you understand that not everyone is built to honor what they once swore. Depend not on promises, but on systems, on structure, on foresight, on a mind that plans rather than pleads. A person guided by strategy cannot be manipulated by emotion. They move through life with clarity, not attachment. When you anticipate betrayal, you do not become paranoid. You become prepared. You are no longer naive about the changing nature of human loyalty. And this awareness turns your pain into power. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop depending on others to determine your peace. You begin to protect your energy, not with walls of fear, but with boundaries of wisdom. Strategy becomes your shield when sympathy can no longer save you. The one who lives strategically doesn't react. They respond. They study patterns, understand motives, and make peace with the truth that people can only meet you at the level of their own consciousness. When you stop expecting perfection from imperfect beings, you gain the calmness of a philosopher. Betrayal loses its sting because you no longer build your worth on the shifting sands of others' approval. You start seeing life through the lens of understanding, not emotion. This is the power Jung called individuation, the moment you stop waiting for the world to stay consistent and instead become your own foundation. The more you expect inconsistency, the less chaos can touch you. The moment you accept that betrayal is part of life's pattern, you step into emotional freedom. You are not shocked when loyalty fades. You are steady, composed, and alert. Sun Tzu wrote, "In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity." When betrayal arrives, it becomes your teacher, not your enemy. It sharpens your awareness, deepens your discernment, and transforms your heart from fragile to fearless. You start realizing that trust is not about expecting others to never fail you. It's about knowing you can rebuild yourself every time they do. This is the essence of spiritual wisdom. To remain compassionate yet strategic, open yet untouchable. To understand that expecting betrayal doesn't make you cold, it makes you conscious. You begin to walk through life like a warrior with inner peace, guided not by sympathy, but by insight. Nothing can surprise or destroy you anymore, because you've already accepted the truth of human nature. And when you master that truth, you rise beyond it. You become the calm mind in a chaotic world, a soul that no betrayal can ever break. Comment below, "I trust strategy over sympathy," if you've learned to see betrayal as a lesson, not a loss. Let this truth remind you that real power lies in your ability to stay calm, think clearly, and move wisely. 4. Appear calm, think cold. Calmness under pressure is not just control, it's power disguised as grace. When chaos swirls and emotions flare, your ability to remain composed makes you untouchable. Others lose balance when they can't read your reactions, because unpredictability is power. The calm person commands the room not through noise, but through presence. Beneath that quiet exterior, your thoughts are deliberate, your awareness sharp, and your decisions strategic. You appear serene, yet your mind is calculating the landscape with the precision of a chess master. People fear what they cannot anticipate, and when you move with stillness and purpose, you become a mystery they can't manipulate. This isn't the coldness of detachment, but the warmth of discipline, a higher form of emotional intelligence born from spirituality and spiritual awakening. It's the art of being in control of yourself when life tests you the hardest. To appear calm and think cold means to master the pause between impulse and action. It's in that pause that your true power lives. When someone provokes you, silence becomes your sword and patience your armor. You no longer rush to defend your ego, because you understand that reaction feeds chaos, while composure starves it. Stillness is not inactivity, it's observation with intention. While others are consumed by emotion, you're studying patterns, anticipating outcomes, and choosing your next step with awareness. This is how leaders are made, through calm analysis, not frantic reaction. Your serenity intimidates those who expect drama, and your restraint exposes their lack of it. In this state of spiritual mastery, your calm becomes a mirror. When you refuse to match someone's chaos, they are forced to confront their own. This is why quiet confidence is dangerous. It reveals truth. When you remain unshaken, others' emotional storms dissolve in the presence of your stillness. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Calmness is that inner awakening, the ability to stay conscious in situations where others sleepwalk through emotion. It's not suppression, it's transcendence. It's knowing that the person who angers you controls you, so you reclaim that control by choosing peace without passivity, strength without aggression. To live this way is to become an observer of your own mind. You notice thoughts? emotions, and impulses as they arise. But you don't serve them. You direct them. You are no longer the servant of your moods. You are their master. Every time you choose to breathe instead of react, you rebuild your mental architecture into something no one can break. Precision replaces reaction. Patience replaces panic. Peace replaces power struggles. And the paradox is that when you no longer need to prove your strength, everyone feels it. Calmness then becomes your spiritual armor, soft to the touch, but impenetrable in battle. So appear calm, think cold, move wisely, and let your quiet presence speak the language of true power. 5. Keep power in silence. Silence is control, and control is the foundation of true spiritual development. When you learn to remain silent, you begin to master yourself before attempting to master the world. The less you reveal, the more others fill in the gaps with their own fears, assumptions, and illusions about who you are. This is your hidden advantage. Your mystery becomes your armor. In a world where everyone speaks to be heard, silence becomes your power. You no longer waste your energy defending, explaining, or proving anything. Instead, your energy becomes centered, magnetic, and self-contained. As Carl Jung said, in all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Silence allows that secret order to rise within you. It is the unseen discipline that sharpens your awareness, strengthens your presence, and separates reaction from response. You begin to notice that words often dilute power, while silence concentrates it. Through silence, you observe more deeply and act more precisely. You start to see that people reveal themselves not through what they say, but through how they react to your quiet. When you stop speaking just to fill the space, you start listening with your spirit instead of your ego. You hear the subtle language of energy, the tension in a room, the intention behind words, the truth hidden beneath smiles. Silence gives you clarity that noise could never offer. It's where intuition speaks and where spiritual growth begins. You understand that not every battle requires your voice, and not every moment deserves your reaction. By staying silent, you remain calm, while others lose balance, and in that balance lies your strength. In spirituality, silence is not emptiness. It is awareness, refined into strength. It teaches you emotional discipline and inner authority. Your restraint makes you unpredictable. Your calm makes you intimidating. And your stillness makes you powerful. People who depend on chaos can't understand those who thrive in quiet. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving others control over your energy. You let your actions, your focus, and your presence speak instead. Silence forces others to confront themselves while you remain unreadable and unshaken. You realize that every unnecessary word is a leak in your power, and every moment of silence is a deposit into your spiritual strength. As you continue to walk this path, silence becomes your meditation, your weapon, and your shield. It allows you to preserve your peace while the world tries to provoke a reaction. You no longer chase validation or approval because you have found something greater control over your inner world. And once you have mastered silence, you have mastered yourself, because power is not loud, it is steady, patient, and deeply aware. This is the essence of spiritual development, learning that presence speaks louder than words, and that silence, when held with purpose, becomes the purest form of power. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful insights like this. Remember, real strength grows in silence. Comment below. I choose calm over chaos. 6. Master the art of absence. Constant presence dilutes power, but strategic absence refines it into something magnetic and unforgettable. When you are always available, your energy becomes ordinary. But when you withdraw with intention, you create an atmosphere of mystery, curiosity, and reverence. People begin to think about you more vividly, to idealize you, to feel your absence like a silence between two powerful notes of music. As Carl Jung once said, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." Your withdrawal is not disconnection. It's order restoring itself. It's you returning to your center to preserve your energy and rebuild your mind into something unshakable. When you step back from the noise, you allow your presence to grow in meaning. You are no longer just a person to be seen, but an experience to be remembered. Absence becomes a mirror that reflects truth. Who misses you? Who values you? And who only sought you for convenience? It filters loyalty and separates depth from superficiality. Those who are aligned with your essence will stay, while those who are drawn to your light for selfish reasons will fade away. In that space, you realize that your worth does not depend on constant validation, but on the strength of your own silence. Absence teaches you that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is not to speak, not to show up, but to let your stillness say everything. Carl Jung believed that individuation, becoming your true self, requires solitude, because when you retreat into yourself, you face the shadows that constant activity hides. This is where growth happens. By mastering absence, you reclaim your focus, sharpen your awareness, and reconnect with the quiet intelligence of your soul. You stop scattering your attention and begin to live deliberately. You transform from someone easily accessible to someone deeply respected. People sense your energy not through your presence, but through the weight of your absence, a quiet, invisible force that speaks of strength and self-control. Humans naturally desire what feels rare, and when you control your visibility, you create value without saying a word. When you reappear, your presence feels elevated, your words resonate deeper, and your energy carries the sacredness of restraint. Every appearance then becomes an event, not a routine. You teach others how to treat you by showing that your time, your focus, and your energy are not for everyone. They are earned through respect. And that is where real power lies, not in domination, but in discipline. Absence, when mastered, turns you from a fleeting figure into an idea, from noise into presence, from being seen into being felt. Your silence becomes your loudest expression, and your detachment your greatest attraction. Like a monk in the temple of his own soul, you learn that in spirituality and awakening, the energy you withhold is just as powerful as the energy you give. As Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." And it is through the sacred art of absence that you awaken to your own inner strength, calm, grounded, and unbreakable. 7. Rule your mind. Rule everything. All power begins within, and your mind is the throne from which every experience is ruled. When you command your thoughts, no betrayal, chaos, or failure can truly shake you, because you've built your foundation not on emotion, but on awareness and intention. Life will always test your mental fortress, but when you learn to discipline your mind like a kingdom, You rise above every storm that once broke you. To rule your mind is to understand that every thought is a soldier and every belief a law. If you don't lead them wisely, they will rebel and rule you instead. Guard this kingdom with awareness, focus, and logic, for they are the walls that protect your peace from being invaded by other people's opinions or your own fleeting feelings. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is the essence of spirituality and the beginning of a true spiritual awakening, realizing that nothing external truly controls you until you surrender your inner command. To master this power, you must replace emotion with intention. It doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means giving them purpose. When anger rises, turn it into clarity. When fear whispers, let it teach you courage. When sadness visits, allow it to cleanse and reveal what still needs healing. Your emotions are not enemies. They are messengers in your kingdom, guiding you towards self-mastery. Yet you, as the ruler, decide what stays and what goes. Every decision, every reaction, every word you speak is either an act of leadership or surrender. Most people allow their thoughts to lead them into chaos, reacting to every impulse. But those who awaken spiritually understand that silence is their power and discipline is their crown. When your inner world is in order, your outer world aligns naturally. The people you attract, the opportunities that appear, and even the challenges that arise all begin to reflect the level of order within your mind. A ruled mind becomes calm, deliberate, and strategic. It no longer rushes for validation, nor bends under pressure. It observes, decides, and acts with intention. You stop seeking control over others and instead master control over yourself. And that self-control radiates power, not dominance, but stability. Others will sense it and either rise to meet it or fall away from it, and both outcomes serve your growth. In spirituality, this is not about denial or detachment from the human experience. It's about transcending the chaos of unconscious reaction. The more you practice awareness, the stronger your inner throne becomes. The more you replace fear with faith, emotion with clarity, impulse with patience, the more unbreakable you grow. A ruled mind equals an unbreakable life, not because pain disappears, but because your identity no longer collapses under it. You become someone the world cannot manipulate, because you understand the true battlefield is within. Once you conquer the mind, you've already conquered the world. To affirm your mastery over your own mind, make your declaration today. Comment below, "I rule my mind," to claim your inner power and remind others that true freedom begins within. In the end, these 7 brutal Jungian truths are not meant to break you. They're meant to rebuild you. They strip away illusions, strengthen your mind, and remind you that real power begins within. When you apply these truths daily, you don't just survive life's challenges, you transcend them. If this message spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos on self-mastery and transformation.